Ladies, what is going on with your money? Do you like what's in your wallet? Do you have an accountability partner yet, so you can stay on track with those goals? Do you like your job? How's your career going? We're going to talk about it this episode of the show. And welcome to the show. I'm Katie Heyer, your guide, your older big sister, if you would, who's made all the financial mistakes already, sharing them all so you don't have to. We like to have a lot of fun. We like to talk about Jesus. Thanks for tracking with us. Today on the show, we are going to be talking about careers, professions, work, and can I even get a job in the midst of a pandemic? I have good news for you, so track with me. Of course, we're going to talk about the Proverbs 31 woman who is our heroic, intrepid, brave, courageous rock star with money. And she has good things to tell us about our career as well. Let's get into it. She seeketh wool, Proverbs 31:13. She seeketh wool and flax, and worketh willingly with her hands. How am I going to take wool and flax and turn that into career guidance? Just wait, dear subscriber, and you will see. I promise. This is going to be good, so hang in there with me. This proverb does not sound like anything that we can get any kind of value out of 2,700 years after it was written. How is this relevant to us? Have you ever sought out wool or flax and worketh them eagerly with thine hands? No, come on, what does that mean? I had to dig a little deeper. There is this fantastic Old Testament commentary by a pair of Old Testament scholars from Germany in the 1800s. I can't pronounce their last names, but I will link to their commentary in the show notes so you can dig in as well. They break it into two parts. She seeketh wool and flax is part one, and she works willingly with her hands is part two. Let's look at that. She seeketh wool and flax. Seeketh, she seeks, she selects wool and flax. This doesn't mean she just looks around for where her iPhone is. She's looking for it. She's seeking it. The word that the Hebrew text uses here is a lot richer than that. What I realized is if we look at the literal translation, the English rendering of an ancient scripture, we're going to miss out on a lot of the richness and meaning. The word that is used here for seek doesn't mean for the external working of a thing. It's not talking about manufacture at all. It means the intention of the mind purposefully directed. The intention of the mind purposefully directed. Okay, that's interesting. How many of us have intentionality when we head out to work and our steps are purposefully directed? Good question. Let's look at that second part of that scripture. She works willingly with her hands. Again, if we dwell on the literal meaning and all we think is she's got her sewing machine out and she's making clothes, how does that translate to winning with money? I guess it saves a few bucks. No, we're missing out on what's really being said in Hebrew here, what's really being said to the original Jewish student. It's not just that she works and she does something herself. They say the work willingly part here is about being active and effective in the pleasure of work as an act of worship. What? The authors, I think their names are Klein and Delitzsch. I don't speak German, I speak French, so forgive me for butchering their names. They say that when you look at that, she works eagerly with her hands. Another translation says she works at the pleasure of her hands. It misses out the part that this pleasure of work in and of itself is an act of sacrifice. It's an act of worship to the Lord. Then you can see, okay, this is a lot more about your mind being purposefully directed at how to worship God by your career. Okay, that's a lot higher than wool and flax. I found that really encouraging and a reminder. Are we being intentional? Are we being purposefully directed? Do you see your career as part of how you worship the Lord, no matter what you're doing? It doesn't have to be in a ministry setting. Are you flipping burgers? And are you working unto the Lord, as they say? Interesting stuff. I think my attitude would change quite a bit if this was my perspective. My husband Dave and I were talking about this scripture before we got on the show, and he said, this reminds me of when I used to work at Starbucks. Sidebar, Dave and I moved to France in 2011, 2012, somewhere around there. And so I could get my master's degree. He had to leave behind his IT career, for which he was trained and got a degree at Florida State University, and he became a cook at an American dive bar in Paris. When we returned to the States, he could not find an IT job. So he worked at Starbucks, and he found it demoralizing at first. He found it embarrassing to have this IT degree. He was a systems expert. He knew networks. He knew security. And he would say, is that a latte or a frappuccino? You know, he hated it. We have all had jobs that we have hated, just drug our feet to go to work to. I certainly didn't like going from work from 4 in the afternoon to midnight or 2 a.m. when I worked the hotel desk at a hotel. I didn't like doing Uber when I knew that after driving around for a Friday night, taking people home, I was going to have to Clorox and sterilize my car. What about going to work as the pleasure of doing the job as an act of worship? That would have changed my attitude. Changes it now. And I hope it helps you too. I think Craig Groeschel said, what if the work is the reward? How interesting is that? What if the work itself is the reward? The joy of serving somebody else. I think if we keep that in our mind, our career is part of how we worship the Creator. Wow, that is going to take us a lot farther. But what about in a pandemic? Sorry, God, I can't really have joy when I go to work because there is no work. I've heard it before, and I've seen it. A lot of industries got wiped out. A quarter of jobs were impacted by the pandemic in 2020. A quarter! So many people you and I know lost their job, got their hours cut back, their client work dried up, or they were furloughed, or they took a pay cut. I took a pay cut. Everybody on my team took a pay cut. It just happens. Everybody on another friend of mine, they all had to go 5%. They all had to take a 5% decrease. I know another company, no bonuses, not a one. Another company shut down entirely. These are all friends I know personally. And you do too. The pandemic was rough. But there is still a ton out there, a ton of opportunity, a lot of promise, and a lot of potential, even in the midst of a global recession. There's still a lot of work to be done. So, how do you pivot? How do you find hope during a pandemic? How do you figure out your next step after 2020 just pummeled you? I have the expert on my show to talk about it with me. This lady is the bomb. She was one of my very first bosses and a true mentor, and we've remained friends over the years. And it was my pleasure that she came on the show. Check it out. Kimberly Moore and I discuss profession in the time of the pandemic.
Ever since you said yes to coming on the show and talking with us, I have had this recurring vision in my head. And it goes something like this. Workforce Plus, your employment solution. Call 1-866-WFP Job 1.
You got it. You know what? It's so funny because it's been 7 years, like since that whole deal and transitioning. And I was out at the Florida Correctional Institution, the prison, and meeting with some folks out there. And I'm leaving the institution, and these people, they're singing the Workforce Plus song, the inmates. And I'm like, this is so crazy. I wish I could have sold that brand.
Hilarious. I mean, you did an incredible job. And so for my listeners here on the Katie Heyer Show, my guest today is the one, the only Miss Kimberly Moore. We worked together when I was just a baby. I was still in college when you hired me as an intern for Workforce Plus. And you, of course, have had a beautiful career. I'm going to actually let you introduce yourself to a better job than me. I was just so happy to, be in your light and just gain everything I could from you in my earlier part of my career. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Kim.
Well, first, I have to say for all the listeners out there, you were amazing day one, starting off as an intern. And I just saw that spark and I knew, I was like, man, if somebody's going to make that investment, this lady's going to go so many great places. And I'm really just glad that we have the opportunity to connect and our paths met. So just great things. And I continue to see it with you. As far as my journey, and I will tell you, it's been one that I really do feel like I've had the chance to live the American dream. Grew up very small community, and I'll make it quick, but grew up in a very small community, rural, not sure what the next step was going to be, realizing that most of the people in my community oftentimes took government jobs or manufacturing jobs. There weren't opportunities that appeared to be beyond that. So I assumed I'd do the same thing, go and get that college degree and go back home and work for government. That was not to be the case. Miss Laura Young, my senior year of high school, she planted that seed. She actually had us write in our journal about what we viewed as that next step for us in our future. And I put to come back, work in state government. And she called me up to her desk and she said, Kimberly, your grades are great. Are you sure this is what you want to do? And I'm like, yes, ma'am. She said, are you sure? And I said, I'd like to be a CEO, in the most quietest voice, because I didn't want anybody else to hear this and get the word out. That's what I wanted to do, this unattainable thing. And she said, well, go back and write that. And I'm like, are you kidding me? I call it my permission to dream. And I've been on that path ever since. Certainly getting that college education, starting in my second job out of college, workforce development in a temporary position, and asking the then CEO, what does it take to end up in your job? And of course, the song that we all hear and that no one has time for these days is that, I've paid my dues and it's taken 30 years. And I thought, I like getting there. I don't think it takes 30 years. So I set about on a path in that temporary position. And 7 years later, I was leading that company, the position that he had held. And for 8 years, served at the helm, first woman, first African-American and youngest in the state of Florida to lead that workforce system. So of course, the 2.0, because yes, 1.0 had been achieved, was getting into education and leading workforce education for a community college, Tallahassee Community College to be exact. Mm-hmm.
And I believe that Tallahassee Community College just won a huge award for being one of the best top ranked community colleges in the nation. Am I getting that right?
We are competing right now. We are in the top 10. So top 10 college in the nation with the Aspen designation. We'll know May of 2021, but we are so excited that out of 1,200 plus institutions across America, the work that we're doing, the impact that we're making, and the lives that we're changing, that it is evident. Yes.
That is incredible. Bravo already for the top 10. I know that there are still so many big things in store for you, Kim. And this is just a tiny fraction of why, dear listeners and dear subscribers, why I wanted Kim to come on the show, because she is incredible. She's always been driven and visionary. And I'm not kidding you. Anytime you walk into a room with Kim, you are going to leave it all the better. So you have this incredible career of workforce development where whatever it was, whether you're managing an entire organization, helping employers connect with jobs, and now you are in the educational sphere. What a perfect posture to have to come talk and educate and inspire people about their career in the time of a pandemic. And I will just add when I started working for you, it was in 2011, 2010. I mean, we were in the midst of recovering from a major recession. So people are struggling. They need hope. Can you even get a job in 2021 during COVID and COVID-19? I mean, tell us, what's your reading of what's
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think, really it starts with having the mindset, the positive mindset that there is opportunity, that there is hope, and then laying out a plan, the plan for the best you. It certainly is attainable. Yes, we've seen record unemployment, but we've seen that before, and
right?
we've seen people come out of it all the better. And I think that, that's one of the most empowering things that I want to leave with the listeners here, that you can too. The whole reinventing, resetting, reimagining the you of 2021, that's your opportunity. That's your empowerment.
Reimagining the you of 2021. And I'm taking notes because my pastor said history makers are note takers. So,
I love it.
so what has to go in that plan? So you have a vision. What's in the plan?
So what's in the plan? And I always tell people, I said, you really got to start from the basic. That is inventorying your assets. What are the things that make you, the best version of yourself? That could be inventorying your skills. A lot of people haven't had that moment to step back and say, hey, what do I do extremely well? The next thing would be looking at your network. Who are those contacts out there that that would add value to this job search? And then finally, your education. All of those things, inventorying them, because what you're going to overlay that against is the job opportunity that you want to pursue next. You're going to overlay it because you want to see what's missing. And whatever's missing, you're going to want to fill that gap. But you can't do it if you don't take that chance to figure out what you have.
So when you look at your skills, let's say someone has taken some courses online and they got a degree. How do they know what's missing in their network, for example?
Exactly. So it depends on if you're staying in the same industry or looking outside the industry. A number of people, and I would encourage you, even in this pandemic environment, to look online and look at what possible networks exist. There are industry networks, potentially for the ones that you're in. There are civic and social networks. Oftentimes, those groups are made up of individuals that may already be in the sector that you're pursuing. You talked about your children, you've talked about your pets or whatever with these folks, and you've not had a chance to talk about the industry itself. So I would inventory those to determine which one of my contacts in that network I can transition to another level. Transition in the sense that we're moving it from the social and talking about future and talking about opportunity and gaining insight from them. Mhm.
What does the wallflower, the shy person who has worked at the same place for 8 years, they've never changed jobs, but they were laid off in 2020. How does that shy person, how do you counsel them to actually go and make those new connections when that's
Well, the shy person, what I always tell them, it's you're one conversation away from that next opportunity. So it's not an interview, something that makes you afraid, but it is a conversation. And I connect with them on all the different conversations that they've had with individuals. I said, well, so was that scary? They're like, no, it's just a conversation. I said, that's what you're going to do with that next person. So whether it's a social network where you're sharing your idea online, you've not done that before, that there's a freedom about it, that you bring something to the table that they don't have the opportunity yet to learn about. You're going to share with them something great as well. You're investing, you're not just taking. So I think really it's the mindset piece of that. It's a conversation. You know what? And my thought has always been, being in an environment where each of the jobs that I have held, including this one, I've been the first woman, first minority. And so I've always, my entire career has been walking into places and doing things that, you may be the only one that looks like that, whether it be gender and or race, and realizing that it's okay because I have something to contribute to that conversation that no one else in this room does.
yeah.
So that's exciting and empowering. And to feel like, the 20 years that you may have invested at a company, it wasn't for loss. It is all for gain, and to share that. Mhm.
I love that. And of course, you can walk into that place confidently because you did, if we take Kim's advice, you did your inventory first. You really considered what skills you have, what you bring, what value you bring to a workplace. So you can walk into those places confidently. And I think that confidence is so important.
It's actually the most critical part of the search, to be very honest. I mean, that mindset, the whole idea of confidence, hope, and perseverance, the desire to just be realize that this is self-empowerment. You are in control. You are the CEO of you. You've never gotten a promotion from anyone else. I'm giving you a promotion today, CEO of you. And literally, that takes you to the next step, because then you're going to need to look at, once you've gotten those contacts, Katie, is, the resume. A lot of people, you mentioned, never thought about a resume, maybe never even had to use a resume to get those jobs that they've held for a variety of years. So realizing that a resume is important. One resume is not the trick. You actually need to tailor the resume.
Right, right. And do not start the resume with, I want a job.
Correct. Correct. So dust that thing off and realize that you may never, it's not like walking up to Mr. or Mrs. Employer these days. It's online. So how do you make sure that it's industry specific, that it's keyword specific for that matter, that they realize that you've researched the company enough to understand what it is that they're doing?
So let's say we have to pivot because, hospitality, people can't really travel. The economy has changed. That is true. So what do you advise someone to do who, let's say they were an events person, or they had a dance company, and so they can't do those things anymore, and now they're going to try to transition to higher education. They're trying to go work for a university. How
Yes.
can you take your skills as a salsa instructor and show that as value to a potential employer in a totally different industry?
So I'm glad that you used that example. And it's always so exciting to hear, like, okay, I can't do anything with these skills. And how does it relate to something else? When I think about, your dance instructor, whatever the case may be, there's customer service. There is nurturing new relationships in the business development. They're not just happening at your place. There's a level of marketing and communication that has to happen with that. It is really how you view the skills and actually attach a name to them that is important in that next job, your next landing spot. So it's not that you lack the skills, but certainly it is how you create the language around what those skills were. Mhm.
And I think you have shared before on LinkedIn, or maybe in a speech, or it's just part of your being, that you can learn practically any skill, but it's the character that matters. Wouldn't you say?
It really is. The skill can be attained. I firmly believe that. But when you think about, the character itself, the integrity, everything else that you bring to the table, that is what you don't want to shortchange, even in a pandemic and in this, job search that you're taking on or embarking on in 2021. Character matters. It matters even more in this environment. And so we should not believe that is not probably one of the most important things that we can bring to it. So, and also with the honesty piece, we all understand that we all need to make a living. We all need to take care of our families. But even with your resume, there's nothing I would not encourage. I'd actually strongly discourage, if that is not a strength or a skill, please do not list it as one. If you're working towards it, that's great. But do not list it if you do not possess it, because you're creating a revolving door for yourself.
Wow, yeah. Don't set yourself up for a trap. You can't, if you can't
No,
deliver, don't promise.
absolutely.
That is good. Okay, so in the midst of a pandemic, people are unemployed. We saw a lot of this when I was on your team at Workforce Plus, was really how to help people have hope again. I mean, it's really hard to be in a job search when you're unemployed. How do you help someone have hope?
Well, first, it's getting them in the mindset that this isn't permanent. It really isn't permanent. This is a temporary place, and that the first step is taking that next step. That is it. Believing that, seeing yourself take that next step is what moves you from where you are to where you want to be. Realizing that it's not something or a journey that you have to take by yourself, that there are people that are here to help you. I think that if I had to look at one of probably the biggest missteps that anyone can take in this market, is realizing or not taking advantage of the resources that are available. So know what those resources are, seek them out, use them. That's what they're there for you. It's what you paid your tax dollars for. Make sure that you're utilizing them, and make sure the second part of that is that once you achieve and reach that next stop, that you look back and that you are I call it extending your hand to help someone else, because they too will want to benefit from your testimony and your story that you've gotten as a result of making it through this journey. You can do it. Yeah. Mhm.
Absolutely. And I think mentorship that you're starting to talk about is such an important part of the journey as well. Maybe you would come back on and talk to me about that at another time.
I love
That's
it. Count
amazing.
me in.
That sounds amazing. This has been a blast. I've got a notebook full of notes that I've taken from our interview. Just so important to have that mindset piece. You're always good at reminding us about remembering that whatever the situation is, whatever negative space we're in, it is not forever. And there are
It's
steps
not.
to take, there are plans you can make, there are things you can do, and people you can connect with to move forward. And for that, Kim, I am so thankful that you came on this show today.
Well, the pleasure is all mine. Anytime I can join you and your listeners, it's a pleasure.
That was so fun. You know, connecting with your old boss from a decade ago. And she hasn't changed at all. She's timeless, she's ageless. I just want to be just like her. If you couldn't tell from the interview, Kim is one of those people that just inspires and encourages and empowers wherever she goes. A real quick recap. So, what do you do in your job search, in your pivot in a COVID-19 economy? I'm going to go over that inventory homework she gave us. She said, do a personal inventory. So, you got to make 3 lists. Number 1, inventory the skills you have. Make a list. What are all the things that you really do well, that you do best, that you enjoy the most? All of your skills, not just at the last job, but go very far back. Go look at your personal side of things. Look at your hobbies. All the areas that you do stuff in, you have skills in. Make this personal list so you can see what you bring to the table. Number 2, inventory your network. What does that mean? She said, make a list of your contacts and connections. You are surrounded by people who want to help you. And don't be nervous to start talking to them about what possibilities are out there. Remember, it's just a conversation. That's all it is when you're talking to your network about your next job. And then education. What do you already have that you can take with you? And what maybe do you need to move forward and take the next step? One of the other great gems that she gave us was make sure you're taking advantage of the free resources available to you. We worked together at an organization called Workforce Plus. It was funded by a grant and it was a nonprofit, so job seekers could come in for free and get help on interviewing, on making resumes, on writing cover letters, on learning how to dress for the job. It was a free resource to them. Libraries have another free resource you can take advantage of, which is a lot of libraries have licenses for digital learning platforms. For example, lynda.com teaches really incredible skills like Photoshop and QuickBooks and AutoCAD, all of these different softwares that you might need for your next job. You can learn them on lynda.com. And your library might have that for you already as part of just your library card. So make sure you're taking advantage of the resources available to you. And remember, Kim is the vice president of the Tallahassee Community College, one of the nation's top 10 colleges, community colleges. And prior to that, she was the CEO of Workforce Plus, a workforce development organization. She started out at a temp job where she was the first person who ever looked like her to walk into a room. And she saw that as a strength, not as a weakness. So don't be afraid to start having those conversations. Make that inventory. There is hope. You can do it. Let's talk about how this career relates to your budget. Let's say you start a side hustle because you lost your regular job, or you're been cut back, or you're using a side hustle to transition into something new. How do you make that side hustle income work with your budget? Simply go to the top, click and add a paycheck. Side hustle brought you $500, let's say, that week or month. Whatever it is, you enter it up at the top of your budget, and then we use the Every Dollar app, and it will tell you how much left you have to plan. So adjust your giving up a smidge since you're now giving more. You're now earning more, so you give more. It's 10%. And then you just walk through your priorities. What is your next baby step? Put it towards your savings, whatever is next on your baby step. So if you're done with your debt, you would take your emergency fund up to a full 3 to 6 months expenses. So you could put all the extra money right into savings. So whatever your side hustle is, you can include it, and you have to include it in your budget as part of your normal everyday diligence. We have a question. Can I really pivot from one industry to another? That's the question. I actually got this twice this last week from two totally different people in two totally different states. A lot of people were impacted. Hospitality, event spaces, catering. So many people are needing to take the skills they have and go into a different universe. The good thing is the specifics of your skill were useful in that industry, but the principles of your skills are broad and can be used in so many places. And what Kim said in the interview was to make sure that you're talking about what you did at your last job in the language of your next job. So let's say you have worked in fast food or restaurants for the last 5 years, and you want to go to a professional setting. Well, how do you talk about fries and ketchup in a way that a accounting firm will want to hire you? You don't need to worry about the fries and ketchup. On your resume, you talk about customer service, productivity, being a self-starter, going above and beyond, following processes, learning new ordering systems. Those things are universal. Those things are skills everybody can use. So just think about the language that you talk about your skills with. Don't worry about who you used them for. Remember, you bring something unique to the table that somebody needs. So start having those conversations. Start, as Kim said, dusting off that resume and make sure it's online, and have hope. There is absolutely hope that the right job is around the corner for you. If you want to ask your question on the show, send it to katiehireshow@gmail.com or connect with me at katiehier.com. I cannot wait to hear back from you. If you've missed any episodes, you can also find them and their show notes on the website, on YouTube, and on all your favorite podcast apps. So please subscribe and share.